Aloha champions, and welcome back to this science video that we are having our only science video for this week. This week is Thanksgiving week, so we're only in school Monday and Tuesday, so you'll be watching the science video on Monday. I know historically I've been trying to keep it consistent on Tuesdays and Thursdays. However, I have a special social studies video for you tomorrow in which we look at the history of Thanksgiving. So, for our science video, we're wrapping up Unit 3, talking all about biological creatures, their structures, and functions. So, to do so, we're going to be looking at two people famous in history who had limitations or helped people with their limitations to their natural hearing or vision or their ways to communicate, and how scientists have worked together to help in areas where our structures and functions may not always be working right. So our big question for Chapter 8 is, what have I learned about structures and functions? Think about the last few weeks of videos throughout Unit 3. What have we learned about how plants, animals, and humans, how our structures and functions help us to grow and to survive? Okay? The first word we want to know, it's not a vocabulary term, but a word I'd like to clarify, is deafness. When somebody is deaf, it means that they have the complete loss of hearing. So they can't hear, which makes it very hard to communicate with somebody if they're deaf, because they can't hear the words coming out of our mouths. Another word we're going to be learning about is blindness. Blindness means the complete loss of vision. So they can't see and their world around them. So that all applies with Helen Keller, who will be the first of two historical people we'll be looking at today. The second is Louis Braille, who invented a system of communication with the blind. Okay? But without further ado, we are going to get started into Unit 3, Chapter 8, Helen Keller and Louis Braille. We have a visual system and an auditory system to help us survive. These systems sometimes do not function correctly. Some people have poor vision and need glasses or poor hearing. Others may have total deafness or blindness. People impaired in these ways must rely on other ways to monitor their environment. These are used instead of sight or sound so that such people can sense the world around them. Our first person we're looking at is Helen Keller. Helen Keller was born in Alabama in 1880. At birth, she was healthy, but at the age of 19 months, she became very ill. Due to the illness, she became deaf and blind. She also could not speak well enough to be understood by others. She had to learn other ways to monitor her environment and to communicate. At that time, no adaptive devices could help Helen hear or see. Instead, she used her hands because our fingertips are full of nerve endings. Hence, they are very sensitive. Helen relied on her sense of touch. Through touch, she saw the world around her. She also used touch to communicate with others. A word to know up here, before we get too far along, is adaptive. Adaptive means being able to adapt. An adaptive device is an object that has been adapted to help with daily tasks, such as hearing aids, eyeglasses, and wheelchairs are some examples of adaptive devices. These are conceived by engineers who design and build these contraptions to help people who don't have their full capabilities of sight or hearing. Okay? Helen had a teacher, Miss Anne Sullivan, and used sign language to teach Helen letters and words. First, Anne would spell the name of an object. She did this by writing each letter onto Helen's hand. Then she had Helen hold and touch the object. Soon Helen was able to use sign language to communicate with others. Helen also learned to use touch to read lips. When Anne talked, Helen touched her mouth to feel the way that it moved. Later, she was able to read books. These books were printed with a special alphabet. This alphabet has a pattern of raised dots to represent each letter. So even though she couldn't see or hear, she's still able to communicate, often through touch. She was taught how to read the sign language that Anne Sullivan would put in her hand. She'd touch lips to see how they moved while people were talking, and eventually she was able to read through a special system. And that special system comes from Louis Braille. Louis Braille developed that special alphabet that Helen Keller used to read. Louis Braille was born in France in 1809, just about 71 years before Helen Keller. Like Helen, he was born with good vision, but when he was only 3 years old, he lost his sight after an accident. Louis went to school like other children. However, he was frustrated that the only way he could learn was to listen. He wanted to be able to read, too. Louis heard about a code that soldiers used to communicate at night during battles. This code was made of raised dots on paper. He studied this code. He then used it as the basis for his new alphabet. By the time that he was 15, Louis had developed a new system of raised dots. The system named after him is known today as Braille. The first book to be written in Braille was printed in 1829. Blind people and those with impaired vision can use their fingers to read Braille. They touch each letter to feel the pattern of dots. The letters and words are arranged as in a regular book. Today, Braille is used in many places other than books. You can find it at many public places. If you've ever been to a bank or inside a building, usually the room you're about to enter has a sign on it and it's written in Braille. People can use a special printer to print out Braille documents from a computer. Braille and sign language help blind and deaf people lead normal lives. They show that humans can adapt when senses don't work, as they should. Helen Keller and Louis Braille were able to adapt in this way. They conquered the hurdles that they had as children. So here's a system of Braille. And so if you think back to Unit 2 when we were talking about signals and codes, where we had Morse code, which was a series of sounds you could hear, this is a series of dots that you can feel as a way to communicate. And so it works on a 6-grid system. So each one would have 6 grids. The bigger dots, like I have here on A, represent what is raised. So for the letter A, it would just be 1 dot. For the letter B, it's 2 dots. C, 2 dots. D, 3 dots. And they're all arranged in a special, unique pattern to help communicate. And so while, unfortunately, accidents or illnesses or just by birth, some people don't have the same full capabilities of their senses, we as humans adapt and design and engineer and problem solve special ways for people like Helen Keller or Louis Braille to help communicate with the world as part of our natural needs to grow and to survive as humans. So, thank you for your time and watching through this video. Take a few moments to answer those 5 to 10 questions on Google Classroom. And with that, I hope you stay awesome. I will talk to you real soon.